Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ed Frezza, and for the next 45 minutes, I'll be your host on our webinar entitled TESA House Hacking. House hacking is a term that some of you may or may not have heard before. Hacking is a simple, cute term, if you will, to denote clever tactics, if you will, clever tips and tricks to address a problem. I recently went on vacation and I remember seeing something on the internet about hacking techniques on packing. So how to get more stuff in your suitcase, but more importantly, how to pack it in such a way so that it doesn't wrinkle. So that's an example of a hack. And house hacking, what we're going to try and do here is to unveil a number of techniques, tips, and tricks that people are using in this new environment to try and make housing more affordable, either from the perspective of getting into housing or from the perspective of if you're already in a home, how do you upgrade? How do you move to a more expensive home, and or how do you make that home pay for itself? Especially our older populations recognize that they're sitting on a pile of equity, a lot of money, but regrettably they're house rich and cash poor. And so a lot of the techniques we'll be talking about tonight is to address that very issue. Is real estate's great, but it's very capital intensive. So how can we address this affordability question in a manner that makes it a lot easier to get in or to make existing real estate we own more affordable? To get things started, I will start by giving a bit of a background on myself and, of course, our company. If you're going to take advice from somebody, I would advise that you first find out where that advice is coming from and is it somebody that actually has some experience. So I'll take a few slides here, if you don't mind, to discuss my background and then our company's background. So, you know my name, Edward Frezza. I graduated in 1989. I started off actually at U of T with a 4-year bachelor in pharmacology and physiology. Realized that science really wasn't my thing. So I completed that, and then I did 2 years in MBA with an emphasis on financing. And that got me a job with a pension fund, their real estate department. At the time, it was called Edgecombe Properties. We had about $700 million worth of real estate to administer. I just started, so I was an analyst. So that gave me a really good insight into how the big boys, so to speak, analyze real estate, whether it's retail, shopping plazas, office buildings and things of that nature right across Canada. From there, I realized that I enjoyed doing that kind of work, but with the recession of the early 1990s, I, along with our entire department, found ourselves without a job. And at that point, I decided to give commercial real estate brokerage a shot. And I at first struggled with it because it was completely new to me, but after a year or so, I started getting the knack of it, and I really enjoyed it. But then too, I realized it's great interacting with clients and helping them make money. I realized that I too want to start owning real estate and creating a portfolio of my own. So that's when I switched gears and started working on the single family residential. And slowly with single family, then I moved up to multifamily and eventually built my own portfolio. So where I'm coming from in giving you this webinar and giving you any of the educational programs that we put on at TESA or working with us as a client, this is the experience that I bring forward and that our company brings forward in helping our clients make the right move. Along the way, I decided that I wanted to give back, and I started my kind of education career, if you will, with the Toronto District School Board teaching real estate courses in 2008, and I'm active in that regard to this day. So I mentioned that we have a number of programs. The one program that we offer that is the I guess cornerstone of what we do is the multiplex development, and this is as a result of two things that's happened in the marketplace. Our premier Doug Ford has introduced Bill 23, which basically allows a single family home in Ontario to be converted or redeveloped into a triplex, 3 units. If you're in the 416, that becomes a fourplex. So this development is something that has gotten a lot of attention. One, because we've hit a snag with the condo market, and flipping and other such investment techniques that used to be quite profitable in the past simply don't work today. So on the one hand, we have Bill 23 that changes the zoning and increases densification, if you will, of lots, which means there's hidden value to be had. And the second part of the equation is the federal's response to this housing issue that we have by introducing CMHC insured financing. So CMHC is insured. They don't actually lend money, but you get what's called a certificate of insurance, a COI, which then you can bring to one of the banks and they would lend on your project. So these two things in a 1-2 combo have introduced a lot of interesting opportunities in the marketplace. And the program that we offer, it basically teases this apart so that everyday layperson can understand what's involved. And just to give you a quick overview of what this is involved, what it entails, it's basically 6 Sundays, and we do 2 modules per Sunday. We start off with right away supply and demand. What are the factors caused to be in this mess, and what are the current factors playing with the levers of supply and demand? Knowing where we've come from will help you understand where we are right now and where we're going to. Then in modules 2, 3, 4, we deal with the boring stuff, if you will, but very, very critical. Financing, that's the grease that makes everything move smoothly. 3 and 4, legal and tax. You want to make sure that you've set yourself up properly for legal purposes and for tax. In module 5, this is where the fun begins. And this is where we start tackling site selection. What makes a good redevelopment site? And number 6, now we start throwing some numbers at it and looking at spreadsheets and how to quantify one lot being better than another. In number 7, now that we know the lot and roughly the box that we want to develop, what's the maximum size box we want to develop, now we need some sort of direction of, well, how many units and what size units are going to be in that box. And of course, design engineering leads to permits, which then leads to construction, and then stabilization, which is getting the building fully leased. Unlike a custom home where you are building a property and the value is the value that a willing buyer, a homeowner is willing to pay for it, a multifamily, on the other hand, is not really worth much vacant, much like a custom home would be worth a lot of money as vacant because the buyer likely is an end user and they want it vacant. Whereas a multiplex, the real value is with the tenants, and the higher the rent you can get, the higher valuation the building gets. So although a lot has been done to get to stage number 10 or number 10 stabilization, really the real value added comes at this critical point, and that's why we dedicate a module to it. And then we round things off with 11 and 12, which is to understand what are the various services that you can get from a company, full service company like ourselves, or somebody else that you might be looking at, either to do a signature build for you, or if you don't have the time, the money, the inclination at this point in your investment cycle, if you will, to do that work on your own, you can be part of a team in the form of a limited partnership, and there's plenty of those. And so we talk to you about what they look like, etc. So that's an overview of the multiplex program. A little bit about our company, and this is important because, as I mentioned, you want to get an idea of who it is that you're getting advice from. And so when we're putting on these webinars, when we're putting on the courses, it comes from experience in the field and not just as a commercial real estate broker or a builder or a mortgage broker and financing aspects. We bring all those together because we actually do those all those various elements. So here you can see we've got 4 divisions. Upper left, we've got the brokerage, and we are a commercial real estate brokerage firm that specializes in land acquisition. And how we differentiate ourselves from, say, a residential agent is that residential agent will look at comps and will look at the needs of the homeowner of that particular property. We, on the other hand, look at the property from the perspective of the numbers. What is it worth right now as is? But then more importantly, what is the hidden potential if we were to optimize the density that's permitted? And how do we ascribe the costs in transforming that home into a 4-plex, 6-plex, 10-plex, whatever the bylaws will permit? And so adding that element to the value proposition at the brokerage stage is one of the areas that we differentiate ourselves. On the lower right, we've got capital. So again, this deals with money. And there are three stages of financing in a typical development. Number one, you have to acquire the land. Number two, you now have to do some sort of redevelopment. Maybe you're just doing an addition or an extension, or maybe you're knocking down the entire building and starting from scratch. So that's where the construction financing kicks in. And then when it's all done, now you're going to do a takeout or permanent financing, as it's called. And this is where we're going to tap into the lucrative CMHC MLI Select funding that is available. There's other programs, but that's the one that right now most people are gravitating towards. On the lower left, we've got TESA development. I want to clarify the difference between developer and builder, because a lot of people unfortunately use them interchangeably, and there is a nuance between the two. A builder in the simplest form is someone that actually takes the drawings and builds it, whereas a developer will be someone that takes a piece of land and can see the untapped potential to bring it to a higher, better use. That person may then also decide to build, but they don't necessarily have to build. And it's often been said that the real money is in the development, not so much in the building stage. So you'll see that a lot of money can be made from taking a property and getting it rezoned or getting it approved for a higher and better use. Whether that person then actually executes and builds or not is not necessary to make a decent profit. And then tied in with the development side is the TESA skeleton. And we have what we call the turnkey superstructure. And the reason we've brought this in the fold in the last little while is simply in response to what's happened in the marketplace. So 5-10 years ago, you'll see that there was a lot of flipping going on, and a lot of people could have taken a property and simply painted it, put a new kitchen and bathroom, and sold it and flipped it. Then, because that got very, very competitive, we had to get more aggressive. We now had to rip the roof off that bungalow and add a second story or an addition, extension, etc. Now it got to the point that you had to knock down the building altogether and do a custom build. As you can see, that requires a much higher level of skill and set of trades that you can rely on. So the biggest and the trickiest part in a development is actually knocking down the property, putting proper footings and foundation, and building the superstructure, the walls and the roof. Once that's enclosed, once you've got that, then most people feel very comfortable in finishing the interior. And of course, once you've closed off the building, you're protected from the elements. And this is also a very critical milestone that lenders look at. So to be able to get to that point quickly, efficiently, and on budget, or ideally even below budget, this is where it's going to set you apart from other people and pretty much guarantee your success. So recognizing that that is a critical milestone for most people to reach that don't have that skill set, this is another area that we offer assistance with. So just wanted to give you an overview of the projects that we have done over the past 10 years. So we started in 2016 on the construction side, building all sorts of different projects. You can see we've got custom home building. In this particular case on the left, we've got a 10,000 plus, almost 11,000 square foot home. We've done top-ups, additions, extensions. You can see we've got new construction. We've gone into cosmetic clinics and retail, commercial spaces, like an office on the far left. We've done gas stations. So all this to say, basically, we know how to build. That's not an issue. We know how to build. Some of the upcoming projects is a 30,000 square foot industrial. But in the last couple of years, again, because of Bill 23 and the emphasis by the province, by the country at the federal level to get more housing in the market, we have repositioned ourselves, pivoted like many other developers out there, and a lot of other custom home builders who now cannot rely on that fail-safe model of build it and they will come. So now, by building the multiplexes, you're building something for which there is a tremendous demand for, and you are not required under this model to have to sell it. You can once you build it, but most people opt not to sell it and hold on to it. So this takes out a lot of the risk that is inherently, typically associated with development projects. Here's an example of a turnkey superstructure that I alluded to earlier. So at the bottom, you can see it involves design and engineering. And so we take care of that aspect and then apply for the building permit on the client's behalf. We then take care of the forming, foundations, pouring, supply, the fabrication of the steel studs, all the way to framing. And at that point, once it's complete, we hand it over to the client. Now they can finish it on their own schedule and on their own timelines. As part of TESA Skeleton, what that entails is something that is not new. LSF, or light steel framing, or cold form steel, as it's also known as, is something that's been around the world for decades. This is not something new. It's just something new to the multifamily side because of the fact that now once you start adding more families, people that don't know each other under the same roof, in a multiplex or an apartment building, the city recognizes that there is a greater need for protocols around safety, fire safety. So whereas a custom home can be built all in lumber, as soon as you start introducing multiple units under the same roof, you now have to have fire retardant or load-bearing walls that can withstand a greater amount of fire to thereby allow the inhabitants to safely get out, but also for fire workers to be able to get and address the building without it collapsing on them. So on the left, you'll see the superstructure, meaning the exterior walls and the joists you can see there for the roof above, made of LSF. The middle there you can see is an elevator shaft. So anything that pertains to load bearing can be done in metal. However, to keep costs down, the interior non-load or weight-bearing walls, in other words, the partitioning walls, we can build those out of 2x4s, 2x6s, what have you, to try and use a hybrid and therefore get the best of both worlds. LSF, being steel, has some advantages. Apart from being a lot more resistance to fire, it is man-made. So every square inch is exactly the same as the next square inch. Not so for lumber. Lumber is not man-made, it's natural. So you'll have knots, you'll have areas that are where the grain is different and causes warping. It's also giving off and absorbing moisture. It's susceptible to termites and to mold and to rotting. So with LSF steel, you don't have these components, you don't have these elements. So these are added side benefits, and you get laser straight walls. So when your drywallers come in, it's a much quicker job, and you get much cleaner end result. This is a close-up of what LSF looks like. So we jokingly refer to the picture you see on the left as our doghouse. So it's basically 5 feet by 5 feet by about 6 feet. And the cool thing about it is that it's all put together with screws. On the far right, you can see the divots where the screws hold everything together, and the screws are below the surface of the steel. They're indented so that when a sheet of of a drywall is applied, it lays flush. It doesn't stick out. So the doghouse, as we call it, on the left, it basically comes apart into 5 pieces. You can just put that in the back of your pickup truck sort of thing. So 4 walls, which we call panels. So when you take these individual steel studs and put them together, assemble them together to actually form a wall, we call that panelization. And clients have the option to either receive these at site as individual pieces or as actual panels where the workers merely put them up and screw them in place, which saves a lot of time and money that way. So now you know what we do and what our background is and why we're putting this presentation together. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of what is house hacking. I've already explained that hacking is basically a term to denote clever tips and tricks to try and address a problem in a different way. So what we're going to try and look at is how can we make house affordability affordable, this problem of housing affordability, something that we can tackle and show different ways of tackling it in ways that are ingenious, that are unique, and that are in keeping with what's happening in the marketplace today. So basically the idea is to buy, renovate, and you're always looking at it from the perspective of I may or may not live in one unit, but I want this thing to somehow generate cash. I don't want to just be a lump of cash equity that's stuck there and not making me any money. In the past, we could rely on 5, 10, 15% increases year over year in the real estate market. Those days are gone. I'm not sure when they'll come back. I wish I knew when they'd come back. I'm going to suggest that they're not going to come back for a while. And the easy money of just capital gains is not going to be here for a while, which means we have to go back to basics real estate 101, where it has to have value from day one. We can't push the expectation of value out of the future with extraordinary capital gains. So here we're looking at a property and we're saying, okay, well, what can I do to this property so that it can generate some income above and beyond what it's going to cost me to carry it? Heat, hydro, water, taxes, insurance, mortgage. So because of Bill 23 in Ontario, we can convert up to 3 units, take a single family home and add 2 more units. So we have a total of 3. In Toronto 416, we can go to 4. We can even potentially add a garden suite. So this is where things get interesting. So we will use the income that we have from these self-contained units. We're not talking about taking this house and carving it up into a bunch of bedrooms and then having all these roommates living with us. No, we're looking at creating self-contained apartments where you probably see your neighbors more than you see your tenants. We'll then look at renting those units either as straight leases, or we'll look at more other more ingenious ways, such as Airbnb, to drive a higher than normal rent. You would live in the best unit, the unit that would be ideal for you, and then you would rent out the other ones, and you would decide which unit would be the best for you. Some people take the main floor and rent everything else out. Some people just figure they don't need all that premium space and take a lesser space. So we've seen all different ways of carving that out. So the result is that you can either live for a lot less than it normally would cost you because these tenant rents are offsetting your carrying costs, or alternatively, you are, with the same amount of money, able to live in a much more affluent neighborhood or a much larger property, a much more luxurious property, which does 2 things. One is the pride of ownership and the lifestyle. Second thing is that it's undeniable that with time, real estate will get more expensive if we give it long enough. If we were to say, will real estate be more expensive in 12 months from now? I don't know. That's a crystal ball question. We don't know. But as you elongate, as you make the runway longer and longer and longer, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that becomes increasingly more and more a yes answer. So I think most of us would agree that it's a 20, 30 years time, things have to get a lot more expensive just because we're adding 1 billion people to the planet every 12 years. And that's putting stress on water, on resources, on food, on careers, on education, and of course, on real estate, just because there's only so much of it. And everybody wants to be in the urban centers. Sure, there's lots of free, quote unquote, free properties if you drive 5, 6 hours to the north of Toronto, for example, but nobody wants to live in small rural areas. Everybody is gravitating towards urban centers. And this is not a Canadian thing. This is a worldwide trend that's been happening in the last 20, 30 years. And it's not anything that is expected to reverse, putting more and more emphasis and valuation on urban properties. So why now? Why not just wait another year or 2? You might say, well, I'll just wait for the market to crash if it hasn't already, in your opinion. Well, first of all, we reached the peak in 2022, real estate peak actually in February of 2022. In terms of valuations, prices have come down since. We also see that interest rates for mortgages are much lower than they used to be at that peak. So that 1-2 punch is going to help your affordability. Prices are lower and mortgage interest rates are lower. So that's going to add to improving affordability. Demand is also softer, creating more selection and negotiating leverage today than it did back then. Why? Simply because the hype is out of the real estate market. The momentum that was propelling it forward, which to a large extent was FOMO. A lot of people were getting into the game of buying for simply the fear of missing out. Many times I've had clients who the rationale was, if I don't buy now, I just will never be able to afford. And so a lot of that mindset was going on. But now that we've seen, especially with pre-construction condos, that whole market has essentially collapsed. And so now there isn't the sense of urgency, and hence demand has pulled off. I suspect demand will firm up as soon as there are market indicators showing that we are definitely at the bottom of the market and we're on the upswing. We haven't seen any definitive signs as of this recording of this webinar, summer of 2026. So we hope that things will turn around, but I wish I had a crystal ball. My guess is as good as yours as when things will turn around. But I would suspect that it's a safe bet to say the worst is behind us at this point. Affordability is still tight. Even though prices have come down, interest rates are a little lower, it's still a challenge how to get into your first home. So house hacking creates these additional incomes, which in addition to your salary, your income from your day job, whatever it is that you do in terms of career, this augments that and makes your cost for owning a home a lot easier to manage. What we're also finding out is that people are increasingly valuing their freedom, meaning that not everybody wants to have a career-oriented job and work the proverbial 80 hours a week. A lot of people are starting to realize life-work kind of balance, and we're seeing that especially with the younger generation. And so this whole idea of putting all your effort towards your career and your job is causing people to question that. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't see a resurgence of buying homes again. But there's more and more of this attitude of, well, I would still want to own my home, but how can I live for cheaper? Because if I can live for cheaper, I can now have more free time. More free time means I can do other things, spend more time with family, with friends, and go after experiences rather than just working. So these are all the factors that are evolving in making house hacking more attractive. So I want to give you an example of what we're talking about here. I just noticed that mortgage assistance, we've got a typo there. Okay, so we've got a 2-bedroom condo, and you are able to live in 1 bedroom and rent out 1 bedroom at, say, $1,000. That works out to about $210,000 of mortgage assistance, meaning if you had a, I don't know, $500,000 mortgage, subtract 210, you really now have to service the balance of that mortgage, which is $290,000. So you can see how simply renting out 1 room would do the trick. The problem is you now have somebody living with you. Not an ideal situation. Next model up or next step up is, let's say you have a townhouse or semi-detached, and now you convert the basement apartment into a rental. Let's say you're getting $1,500. Well, that now translates into $315,000 of mortgage assistance. So now you just have to pay the mortgage on the balance of that. Let's say we now have a detached home, so we've got a larger basement to work with, and so we can get a little bit more income. Now that translates the $1,800 that we could get translates into, say, $380,000. If we can get 2 units in the basement, now you can see that doubles, and now we've got $760,000. So you can see where I'm going with this. And if you have a 3-unit basement rental, because legally we can do fourplexes in Toronto, that takes us to 1.14 million. So this gets quite exciting very, very quickly when you realize the opportunities. The problem is in creating, not the problem, but the challenge is in how do you convert that bungalow, that detached, and bring it to that final stage. And that's where the devil lies in the details. And most people don't have the background, the experience to start attaching timelines and attaching costs to putting it together. And okay. Multiplex conversion. So here's where you're converting the property into a triplex. Next one is converting into a fourplex. What if you leave the property alone and just build a garden suite or a laneway suite in the back? And say you're getting 2,800 for that, that's $600,000 of mortgage assistance. So you can see I'm creating different scenarios that are possible, and each one obviously is site specific. So no two sites are the same, so we can't expect to apply all these various scenarios to all properties. It very much becomes site specific to understand what is possible. So let's do a case study and look at a path to a custom home. So this is a current, we're still working on this. This is a current TESA client. The property is in Richmond Hill. What we're trying to do is create a custom home for the client. They want to live in a more luxurious, neighborhood, more luxurious home. Problem is, they don't want to be able, they want to be able to live there for a lot less than it would normally cost. So what are we going to do? We're going to convert the basement into two separate units. We're going to generate that income, and we'll show you two ways of generating that income. One, Airbnb. The other, straight rental, where you get a lease and you don't have to worry about daily or weekend rentals. It's steady, and there's pros and cons to both. And then we're going to build an extension and modernize the entire main and second floor and exterior. And because of the extensiveness of the renovations, it essentially will be a brand new home, even though we're not knocking it down, and thereby saving time and saving money for the client. So to give you an example with a diagram, the blue is a 2-bedroom unit in the basement. The pink is a 1-bedroom, and the green is a shared laundry space, which is at the front there, you can see. Okay, so you can see that it's decent size rooms. So we started off with the demolition of the basement, obviously, with an older home, typically probably built in the 60s or 70s. We're getting rid of all the infrastructure in the basement because this is an opportune time to do so. So we're getting rid of all the old clay, underground services, put everything brand new. This is your time to do it. You can also see what the property looks like in terms of the height and the HVAC, etc. So afterwards, this is what it looks like afterwards. The finishes are, think of a hotel, boutique hotel. So it's very modern, and it's very cleverly put together. It's very modern, very chic. And this is an idea, it gives you an idea of the type of rentals that you need to create that will generate the income that I'm going to show you right now. So we had a 2-bedroom in the other one. Here you have a 1-bedroom. And so here I'm showing you the income that you're seeing. So these are the actual Airbnb snippets, if you will, for a 2-bedroom apartment, basement apartment. And on the right is a luxury 1-bedroom basement apartment. You can see the rents that are being generated. I just got to move the screen over. You can see the rent for the 1-bedroom is $35,000 for the year, for the 12 months. For the 2-bedroom was $44,000. So if you add that up, it's about 79, just shy, a hair shy of $80,000 of net revenue. So that's about $6,600 of revenue per month, and that supports $1,352,000 mortgage assistance. Next slide. If we try and look at the property from the perspective of what does it visually look like, on the left, you can see the before. So we played around with the front and ripped the face off and basically brought an extension, bringing the property closer to the street, if you will. So that created some space. We also got rid of that angular roof and had a flat roof, and therefore created more height in the ceiling heights. So we used to have 8 feet. We went to 10 feet. That gives it that luxurious feel, and that gives it that more grandness, if you will. And then we did a complete interior build out. In other words, everything was brought down in studs. So new insulation, everything was, if there was any squeaky floors or anything, all that was repaired, new electrical, new plumbing. So even though we didn't knock the property down, we are essentially ending up with a brand new product. So you can see what I was referring to earlier. The extension is the pink. So we brought the face of the property forward. to take advantage of that footprint that wasn't being properly utilized. We've added height to the property by getting rid of the sloped attic roof there that served no purpose really. So now we were able to bring the main floor and the second floor higher to give us those 10-foot ceilings. This is what it looked like when we were at the early stages. And you can see the concrete at the front, concrete footings for the two-car garage at the front. So you can see how much the front has been extended. This was all done while the homeowners still occupied the home. And this is more or less what it looked like until recently. So this is what it looks like framed with the extension framed. An aerial view, so that shows how the top is flat to optimize the ceiling heights. And this is what it looked like as of a week or 2 weeks ago. So center picture shows a very angular, very modern type of building, typical of a $3 million custom home build. On the left, you can see the skylights and the height of the ceilings. On the right, you can see the level of infrastructure that had to be reintroduced. Everything from brand new insulation, heating, cooling, piping, plumbing, electrical, all that good stuff. And this is the kitchen hasn't been put in yet, but these are the renderings of the interior. So you can see the level of home that you will end up with. And this is critical because I'll show you how little it costs to own this after it's all said and done, to live here, but to give you an insight of what we created and the value of lifestyle. How do you put a price on that for the homeowner? So they've created value and they get to live in a cool space. Here's a comparable. So here we're saying, okay, well, how do we know that we've created any value because we're not selling the property? So what we're going to do is look at a comparable. And this is a comparable property in the same neighborhood, same size, 3,600 square feet, sold for $2.940 million in December of 2025. So what, 6 months, 7 months ago? So this is complete value. So let's look at the numbers. This is a 50 by 135 lot. And if you were to if you were to buy a existing bungalow in the area that had this footprint that would be comparable to the client's property that we're working on right now, if you were to go out and actually buy a bungalow with the intent of doing the same level of work, what would the numbers look like? Well, if you're buying the bungalow, 1.1 million, we're going to have soft costs of 375,000 and change. So what are soft costs? Soft costs are basically everything that's not a hard cost. And hard costs are lumber, your materials and your labor. So if it's not materials or labor, it's probably a soft cost. So this is all your engineering and designing and consulting fees and appraisals and surveys and things of that nature. Hard cost is the actual nails and lumber and labor to put it together. So on the left, you can see that if we had to create this from scratch, going out and buying a bungalow, we're looking at 2.8 million roughly. The after repair value, as indicated from that comparable, is 2.94. So we roughly created about 100,000, just over 100,000 in equity for the client by doing this. So when the building is completed and they have their permanent financing, they will leave about 565,000 in equity in the deal. So now they're controlling an almost $3 million property for just over $500,000, 565,000 of their own equity in the deal. The mortgage balance is 2.261 million. Well, that's a mortgage of almost $11,000 a month if they had no other income to support it. But recall that we created these 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments. So we've got two scenarios. And again, scenario A is to say, I don't want the fuss. I don't want the fuss and muss of dealing with tenants. I'm going to get a tenant and that's it. Sign a 1-year lease. Don't bother me. Option 2 is to say, you know what? I don't mind having turnovers and managing Airbnb tenants because I'm going to be making a lot more money. So let's look at both scenarios. Scenario A, the easier one, is sign a lease and you're getting $2,000 per unit, roughly $4,000. Scenario B, we're going to do Airbnb. So that's 6,000. In scenario A, if we're creating $4,000 in added income, if we subtract that from the 10,700 obligation, that leaves us with a net new obligation of only 6,700 to live in this home. With scenario B, you can see that now you're living in a $3 million home with a mortgage of about obligation of about 4,700 a month. Now, these are very simple numbers. I understand, but it's to scratch the surface of what is possible and to give you an idea of how this might work for you. So how does this whole process start? How do you get started? So now we're at the point that if you were interested in proceeding forward with house hacking, you could work with us in the following manner. So typically the manner in which we work with is to look at the process in a methodical manner. And we start off working with clients from a project scope evaluation. And that basically understands what the financial strengths of the client is, what is your borrowing ability, what is your income. Of course, that's typically similar to applying for a mortgage so that we understand what you can qualify for. At the same time, we will understand what it is what you're trying to achieve from this house hacking project. Do you want to live in one unit so that you can actually get into the marketplace, or are you already owning a property and you just want to own a much more luxurious home, for example, or a much larger home? So understanding the client is first and foremost. From there, we move to location analysis. And here we're understanding exactly where the client wants to live, but then more importantly, also looking at the site and seeing what the site has that might impinge on the success of the project. Meaning, for example, trees. If there's a significantly large tree or a certain species on the property, that can impact the development potential. What about if TRCA is involved? If it's close to a floodplain? These are things that are not apparently obvious to the casual bystander, but these are elements that critically affect the value of a property. So two properties right next door to each other that appear similar can be drastically different in their potential. We do a complete zoning review to understand what is permitted in terms of limits on the side and front and rear setbacks, understanding height limits. So these are some of the elements that we look at in evaluating and helping the client evaluate the site. From there, we then understand how we're going to find that particular lot, and this involves a number of different things. The obvious is to go to the MLS and see what comes up. The more effective way is by trial and error, door knocking, and other methods that we have as realtors to be able to uncover properties that have that are on the cusp of being listed, where there is a motivated seller, but have not yet been listed on the market rather. And we, through our daily conversations with many other owners, are able to come up with these kind of opportunities. And then fourth is we now have a property that the client likes, that makes sense, financially makes sense, and has the potential to achieve the client's goals. And this is where now we get to work in putting together an offer, negotiating it, which of course requires understanding what the seller's expectations are, et cetera, et cetera. So all this together is part of the house hacking acquisition process. This is what we offer our clients. And if you don't engage us, this is the kind of service that you should be looking for in agents that you're working with or thinking of working with. So here is my contact information if you'd like more information on any of the aspects that were talked in this webinar. I encourage you to go to our website. There's a lot of information, tesa.ca, and this is where you'll get a lot of information on ourselves, on the team, but also on the various aspects of the 4 divisions that TESA operates under. At this point, this is the conclusion of the webinar, and I'll open it up to questions and answers from our members. Thank you.